I was up in northern Norway, and I had prayed for about 10 years to meet Ron, because I had read in a small notice in a Swedish daily newspaper that the Ark of the Covenant was found. And so I thought, if this Ark really has been found, then it must be a man of God that found it, because God wouldn't trust it to anybody else. So I said, Lord, please let me meet this man, you know. And then I think it was 10 years later, I came up to northern Norway, and somebody put a video. They said, you gotta see this. And they put the video in, and there it was, the 4 presentations of Ron and his 4 fans, and among them was the Ark of the Covenant. I thought, this is the guy that I've been praying about to meet. You know, and in the end there was a presentation of the Wyatt Archaeological Research. So I just made contact, and I found out that the Norwegian group was going down with Ron that very autumn. I saw this tape, I think in September or October 95. And then I went with this Norwegian group in the end of November to meet with Ron and to travel with him. And I actually did an extra week because I really wanted to check on this man to see who he was, because people were saying, well, you can darken a mountain peak on a computer, and this guy's a fake. And so I thought, I want to check this out for myself. And immediately when I saw these things, what moved me a lot was, of course, the story about the Ark of the Covenant. But when I saw you presenting Mt.Sinai, and this is where Israel got the 10 Commandments, it moved me to tears, and I just felt I want to go there. I knew it was a place where God had presented himself, you know, and it was, I think it's just in my own heart, it's a haunt after God. I was just longing. So I began to pray to the Lord. I said, Lord, help me to get into Saudi Arabia. And I immediately, you know, after the trip to Israel in December, the following year, in January 96, I applied for a diver's license, because I figured I wanted to see these things on the bottom of the sea myself. And I began at the same time to pray and ask the Lord to give me contacts, because I wanted to get into Saudi Arabia. And would you believe it? That summer at that hospital up in northern Norway, I was going to do a whole year there. That summer I had a patient that came from Saudi Arabia, and I was amazed. It has never ever happened to me. All the thousands and thousands of women that I've worked with as midwife, no one ever came from Saudi Arabia. But that summer a woman came from Saudi Arabia as a refugee into Iraq and then on to Norway. Another thing that happened was that I met a gynecologist. He just told me that I went to Saudi Arabia. I'd never met a gynecologist. He came up to do a locum in the hospital up there. I've never met anyone before who just said that he'd been to Saudi Arabia. And then 3 weeks after him, another one came. And of course, I started to interview them a lot, you know, and I said, please, can you tell me how you got in there? And they gave me the name of a lady in Copenhagen who has an agency and has contact with the Saudi Arabian officials and the hospitals, and send hospital staff over to Saudi Arabia from Scandinavia. So I just got in contact with her, and she sent me the application forms, and in September she came to Stockholm and she interviewed me. And she told me what was required and everything, and then from that time just rolled on, you know, because I had to do many vaccinations. It took like 3 months to prepare to go. Well, being a woman in Saudi Arabia is tough. um, but you know, as a Westerner, you have to adjust to that and be willing to adjust to it. But the women, they are dressed in a black abaya. They, in a certain area where I was, they even had to cover their whole face and their eyes as well, and their hands. They had gloves on their hands. So it was like when you met people on the street, it was like meeting black ghosts. I mean, you could hear a voice talking behind this black material, but you couldn't read any eyes or read a face. We all had to adjust. What I was suffering because of the heat, you know, because wearing a black material and then the sun on top of that, that was very, very hot being out in the streets. So in midday you would never see people. You wouldn't see the women out in the streets. They would come out maybe in the evening to do some shopping, you know, when the sun was setting. Also, you were very restricted. You were not supposed to drive a car. You were not supposed to go in a car with somebody that you were not married to. And that really put boundaries around the women. They were mostly in the houses, actually, or going with their husbands to shop. But very seldom you would see them out on their own. That year they beheaded 4 people on the street outside the big mosque in that city. People who had been dealing with drugs or killed people or so. And it was a big event in the city. Even, you know, it was announced ahead of time, and even some Arabian male staff went. Only males went to see those things. So they went to see this event, you know. Well, I studied the Wyatt archaeological research, their stories about how Ron was in the desert. I also read Larry Williams' book, the Mountain of Moses, and but it really didn't help me very much because the desert is so vast and you can travel for days, you know. So I had to pray my way, and I said, Lord, please show me a way. And I found out that at the hospital was a diver's shop, a dive club. I went in there and became a member, and I was there like for a couple of months without telling why I really was in Saudi Arabia. No one really knew. But after a while I found out that I just felt one day I came in there that I should tell 2 guys. And an elderly man from Switzerland, he was standing close by and heard my conversation. And he came up to me afterwards and said, I have been by that mountain. He had read the Mountain of Moses, and he had gotten a permission to go to the mountain, a military permission, and a whole convoy of American militaries went to see this mountain. And they were having like a big reception by the Bedouins and Bedouin police. And he showed me many pictures from that. And while they were driving their way to the mountain, they actually did a recording, like the militaries do, how they drive to the mountain. So he was the guy that really opened up for me to find the mountain, because I had been looking for it. I did at least 5 whole long day trips just looking for the mountain, and every time I was getting closer to it. But always something used to happen, like the last time when we were like only 4 kilometers from reaching the mountain. The guy that then was driving, that was Robert Howard, his tires got stuck in the sand. And so there we were, and we were, some Bedouins came to help us. We were also invited into a Bedouin camp, and they gave us coffee from the fire, and They really treated us nicely. They were so lovely, these people out there in the desert. If the Bedouins, most of the time they talk to the men. They address the men. They're not supposed to look at women, But because they knew we didn't cover our faces, and they were sort of more relaxed with us, I think. First thing I saw was the white guardhouse that you had on your pictures. I recognized that one, and also from your video. So I knew that I was on the right spot. That area is closed off by a fence, but it's like a small hill outside of that. And when you stand on that hill, one day we were looking down, and I just noticed that fence was actually broken down. It was lying on the ground on some places. So I just figured it must be easy to get in there. I even could see wheels of trucks driving into the holy precinct. So I thought, I'm going to come back here and just do that. And so me and another guy, we just came there one day. And he didn't dare to take the risk because he didn't want to lose the job. So he was staying outside. And I just rushed in very fast. I was running and stumbling and falling. I think I fell 4 times because it's a very rocky area. It's a long way in there, actually, it is. But finally I saw it, and I recognized some of the white pillar pieces that Ron had been talking about. I saw them, and I knew I was in the same place, at the right place, and I just stopped to take a lot of pictures. Well, when you are on the Bedouin road and you sort of hit the holy precinct going south, then the road that continues south, you can also take a left turn that's going east, and it's like, I measured it to be 1,600 meters from the holy precinct is the golden calf altar. I measured that on my GPS because I did waypoints by both places, and then you can measure the distance between, and it looks like huge boulders piled up. They are huge, like the same size as the boulders that are making up the pyramids in Cairo. They've been piled up neatly like this, and on the back side, on the front side, it looks they're still in place, but on the back side they have been tumbling down. There, right outside the holy precinct and the golden calf altar, there is an enormous plain. Enormous. It takes a long time to just drive through it, which we have done. And there is a way going through the mountain ridge. There's just sort of mountain ridge is coming like this, and it's just breaking its way through, and coming out into another vast plain. In ancient tradition, as I understand it, Mount Horeb or Mount Sinai is a place where God revealed himself. And they knew that from the story of Moses. And then later on, when Elijah needed to seek God, he walked from Carmel down to Mount Horeb to seek God. Also Paul went that journey. That's what Galatians 1:17-12 tells us. And so there is a big cave there in the mountain, and the story in 1 Kings 19 and verse 11 tells us how that the prophet Elijah came there after having walked 40 days and 40 nights from Mount Carmel, and he went into this cave and stayed over the night, and then God's voice comes to him and says, what are you doing here, Elijah? And he tells why he's there. And then God says, come out and stand on the mountain before me. And if you see the picture that I've taken, there is a place outside the cave where you actually can stand. And you can see the whole mountain and the whole view there from there. So then the story goes on to tell how there came a storm that broke loose pieces from the mountain and also rent rocks. The Bible actually says that the rocks rent. And when I had read that story, I realized this is the place where Elijah came. So I started to look for those things. But I think I've been like by the mountain 5 times, and I've noticed those stones without having it clicking first. You know, I saw stones lying in the holy precinct. It's a big boulder. It looks like a knife has just cut it into 2 pieces like this, just like this. I've been traveling in the desert for so many days, just looking for this mountain and this place. Nowhere have I seen boulders that have been split like that into 2 halves, like you cut an egg with a sharp knife and it just is lying like that. So that was one thing I saw. Another thing that I saw was that there were stones there that looked like they had been scourged on the top. They were too far from the scourged mountain top to have come tumbling down from that one, so they must have been scourged on place at the holy precinct. So the underside of them, some of them have been turned because the Bedouins have been doing work there. On the underside there was no scourging. And you know the Bible says that God came also, a fire came. God was not in the storm, he was not in the fire, but the fire came when Elijah was standing there waiting for the Lord to come. I found it interesting when I asked Marinelle Wyatt to come to count the plain there and find out the middle of that plain, and she gave me a waypoint which I plotted into my GPS, and we went there by car, and when we came to the very middle of it, there was a tree standing, and on that whole plain there is no tree as far as the eye can see. You know, but there was this tree, and it looked like even there had been water there. And I think there is a scripture saying that the tabernacle was once in the middle of the camp. But I also want to talk about Paul, you know, because people's thinking, what they think, as soon as he got saved, he went and became a teacher in Antioch. That's how they think, you know, that he was teaching in Antioch for 3 years before he began his traveling ministry. But he says very clearly, he tells what happened when he got saved. In Galatians 1, he tells that. And he says he didn't go up to confer with the apostles in Jerusalem, he didn't go here and there, he went to Arabia. I believe that it was a tradition among the Jews that this is a place where God revealed himself. When he found out that I had been at the mountain and that I had found the crossing site and that I had been again to dive there, he asked me to film some of the bottom of the sea, and he lent me. I went over in September 97, I went over to Nashville and borrowed equipment, a video camera and underwater housing, and I filmed, and Ron said, just don't care what you see, just film the bottom of the seas, and which I did. And then he also asked me to try to find Mara, where the bitter waters were made sweet. And so I started on that one, and I started to do a search, and on ancient Arabian maps I found the name Marra. And Mara was a well, and well on Arabic, there are 8 different words for well in Arabic, but one of them is Ajin. And so I found the name Ajin Marra on an ancient map. And I got so far as making the waypoints, I plotted it into my GPS, and I was going to go there, but I never got to it before my contract was over and I was going to leave. So that was my mistake, but somebody else went to document the rent rock again. Somebody that I showed the way, and they found it, and they sent the waypoints for that. But as far as I know, no one has been to Ajinmara yet, and that's why I really wanted to go back, because Ron asked me to do that. I never got to it. No, well, I was maybe a little bit fearful, because I heard, Ron was warning me. He said, you can be raped and be buried in the sand and all of that. And so I was praying, but my longing for God was greater than my fear. And then I went to a Sunday morning meeting in my church, and I was praying and asking the Lord to speak to me, because I had these fearful thoughts. Then at the church coffee afterwards, a Jewish girl stands up and she says, "Does anybody want a prophecy here?" I said, "Yes!" She prophesied to another guy first, then she came over to me. She prophesied my fear. She says, you don't have, she didn't know what I was going to do. And she prophesied to me that I did not have to have any fear about being raped in the desert. Because God was going to protect me and hold his hand over me, which he did. Or he always has done. All the time when I've been traveling for the kingdom business, he has always protected me.